So no, I think it's for the worse. That's what I think. Communism's for the worse.
Oh yeah, we'll discuss that, won't we? Yeah.
Let's discuss it now then. You little.
I'm not cowering.
Okay.
You are. You're going into your little shell.
No, I'm not.
Giving us yapper.
Alright, you want to introduce the topic?
I want to introduce communism. All right. Okay. Let's explain communism. Right now, it's a pretty controversial system. It was employed by not communist Russia, but communist Soviet Union in the 20th century, most famously, I think.
Yeah.
It was also a big part during the Vietnam War, and
It was in Cambodia as well. It was installed.
Oh, BTW, we're joined by Peter Malloy today.
Peter Malloy, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Communism, as well, if you don't know what it is where the government allocates the resources. Would you say that's true, Colin?
Yeah.
Do you think that's the full definition of communism?
It's enough. It's enough for us to have a debate around.
Okay.
I'd say it's just full government control of kind of resources, but also more just kind of like human resources as well, kind of education.
Well, resources is human resources, labor.
Yeah.
No, well you can separate the two. You can separate the two.
What, labor and resources?
No, as in like production. And also, like, humans have liberty under communism.
Okay.
But would you say that all like resources given to the proletariat or the masses is like equally allocated?
Yeah.
Colin, you said that people have freedom under communism, and I think in the kind of what Karl Marx set out, maybe they do, but in anything that we've seen so far, I'm struggling to see an example of where people have had freedom or any sort of freedom that could actually be seen as anything better than what we have as a Western liberal democracy. Could you sort of contextualize that in,
Yeah, you know what? I agree that Stalin was botched. Mao's communism was botched. But I think if you understand what communism really is and what it's trying to start off of, you kind of understand what, I'm not going to deny, right? I might have said this before, but I'm not going to deny that Stalinism is communism and Maoism is communism. But it's botched communism, and it's not communism that has started in the right circumstances. Marx very clearly defined what he wanted to start communism in, and those just weren't it. You can look at Lenin, Trotsky, even they didn't think that communism could be just implemented just like that. And Stalin was one of the first major people who properly tried to implement it like that. So, although it is communism, it's not a fair representation of communism, if you know what I mean.
So do you see in realistically, do you actually see a situation where the communism that Marx really probably prophesized actually coming into fruition?
Is that possible, do you think?
I don't know. I don't see it happening in my lifetime, to be honest, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to I want to preface this, I'm not a communist, but I do think that communism has it gets a bad rep. I think that's fair enough to say. If you look at what it is, right, you can look at case studies, but if you look at what it is at the core, it's not like an evil thing. So I think we just need to find a better in between, I guess.
So what would you say you are? You say you're a socialist, right?
Yeah.
What do you think the difference is between communism and socialism?
I mean, I say as a socialist, I believe in the state allocating wealth and to make sure that humans have everything they need, just as a basic level, which we don't have right now. And I would separate that from communism because I think a market to an extent can be quite good.
So would you still have, for example, doctors getting paid more than, sort of a school teacher or a bin man? Would you want allocation of wealth to be equal among all jobs, all?
Yeah, I would have allocation to be equal among jobs, and I'm guessing we're going to have quite a big discussion on if that's fair or not. But to preface, I don't think there's any issue with having the same pay for different jobs.
Yeah. Okay.
Should we speak about that now?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go for it.
You go first, Pete.
I mean, I just totally disagree with that pretty much on every level. I think people should be paid enough, regardless of what role you're in. But I genuinely think there is no way you can advocate everyone being paid the same. It just does not make sense. Why not? Because people don't deserve to be paid the same on a basic level. Other people work harder than other people, have more important jobs than other people that deserve to be paid more. And also, I'd say, Colin, it's a point of
you'd argue that a bin man doesn't work any less hard than a doctor. He does his job that he's been assigned to do at the end of the day.
But the value is of Well,
Is it?
What are we
Yeah.
comparing it to a doctor, say a bin man and a doctor, let's say. I'd say the value of the doctor to society is higher.
And also the training as well, as a doctor. I mean,
if
how
you-
long is a medical degree?
without either, like society isn't very like without just like manual labor, like working class manual labor, like society doesn't function.
But we live in a system right now where we have both. We have bin men and we
Yeah.
have doctors, and money is in a capitalist society which we live in now. That is how we measure value through money, because that's a market mechanism. Sure. And right now, a doctor will cost more than a bin man. We see that in America, so that clearly shows that their value is higher.
Yeah, economically, in terms of money, that's
but
you're measuring someone's value on a capitalist principle.
Yeah, but that's what we use to measure value in a capitalist society.
Yeah.
There'll probably be a different mechanism in communism, but still money
There
in our
will
system
be
is the gauge of the value.
There's no value of an individual in a communist system because everyone is equal.
I think where my issue, I don't really have an issue with like the sort of the value of the two, because obviously both are needed in a society. My issue comes, I just don't think that any human, goes through 7 years of doctor training, 2 years of junior doctors, and just to with the idea that all they want to do is help people. There's going to have to be that money incentive which helps them, and I think if they're getting paid, it's just not pragmatic to believe that if they got paid the same as we, if we're using the example of bin men, I think there would be a shortage of doctors, and obviously the health service isn't in a good place
right.
at the moment.
You talk about money being an incentive, right? Money is an incentive because it's there. In a communist society, when money isn't an incentive, people will just do it anyway. Like, I'll ask around the table, say you got to choose between being a bin man and being a doctor and both are paid the same. I'm not lying when I say I genuinely rather still be a doctor and go through that training, because I think it's just a much more gratifying job. I think I'd enjoy it much more.
It's not a binary choice in a communist society. So normally if you're
the point of what I'm trying to say is that money as an incentive isn't as powerful as you think when you take it away.
Well, yeah, I disagree there, because I think the opportunities that what money provides is actually an incredible incentive. The experiences you can have due to having money is actually really important, and buying a new car or going on an unbelievable holiday might be, for a doctor, incredible. That may be what they want to do. So, and I think they need that sort of. Some of them, obviously, there's definitely that.
Yeah, but do you think it's fair that a doctor has much more opportunity to do that than someone who works 3 jobs, waiting different places? Because some people that do that will never have the opportunity to do that because they do not have the material resources to pay for it. Whereas a doctor, even though they work harder, they've got much more money to do stuff like that. Because
what Finley's saying, they worked hard. I know there's.
No,
I don't know what you're saying.
That's quite dangerous to say, because when you say they deserve that because they worked hard, that to me that implies that you just don't believe that bin men and people who do working class labour work hard, which I very much disagree with. They do a role that's fundamental to our society. Otherwise, they would not be doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying that capitalism is a foolproof system. There are definitely flaws to it, but I would just say that the downfalls of capitalism aren't as drastic as the downfalls of something like socialism or communism.
Yeah, I also think it's kind of the problem with what Colin is proposing in terms of should people a banker and a binman be paid the same. I think it's a case of, if that was ever to be implemented in any shape or form, you'd have to have it across a whole economic area, not in just a country. It would have to be an EU-wide thing, because if you look at the UK currently, we run a services surplus because we're so attractive. We bring in big salaries, we bring in big money.
Mark said that communism is either international or it's nothing. So he recognizes that you can't go it alone, and that's another reason why the Soviets failed, because of such capitalist pressures, obviously becoming a part of their civil wars. So I recognize that, if the UK does it and suddenly doctors are getting paid 30 grand a year instead of 60 or 70, they probably will. But I'm just saying, in terms of an ideology and a principle, I think it's the right thing.
Okay, but what's actually what is the transition then? If you ideally would like to see that at some point, maybe not in your lifetime, but however many hundreds of years down the line, how does that go from the system we have now, where you can get paid millions a year or you can get paid 10 grand a year? How do we level that out? In any way, shape, or form, especially with a massive public will against what you're saying.
Right, I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm not like an economist. I'm like, and I'm not like a politician in terms of I can like I know
Policy,
what policy is going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think if you just look at what's happening, I disagree with the fact that you think that people don't want more socialism. If you look like the will of the people, like people want like higher taxes on the rich. That's like overwhelmingly popular. People want more public spending, and it's I don't know, like you see just gradual like tax increases and gradual increase in public spending. I think that's like small steps towards like a more socialist state, and I think that's what Marx has always said. It's a slow process, right? That's the disagreements between what was it, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Like what Bolsheviks wanted to like, just have it done in Russia, but Mensheviks wanted to have it as a slow, gradual process, and ultimately, the latter were like closer to what Marx did suggest, which is that you need to take it slow, and it's not like because if you don't take it slow, Peter is correct. Like you don't have the will of the people, right? Mm-hmm. Because people are like, what's happening? But if you take it slow and people realize benefits over time, then people see the benefits.
But I mean, you say over time, like people realize the benefits, but I think ultimately it's more a case of just like ingrained human psyche about the issue in terms of people want money, and I don't have a particular problem with people wanting money, and I think that incentive, as long as money as a concept is always going to be there, and it's sort of the incentive to have more than you have.
Yeah, people.
It's a whole Darwin idea that we are innately, we are competitive. We want to strive for more. So yeah, and I think capitalism probably enhances that in a good way as well.
I mean, if you look at what you're saying in terms of what did you say? What'd you say again? It escaped me.
Like people strive for greed and
so if you kind of argue that money is sort of a Darwinistic like evolutionary thing, then like even though that may be true, I don't see why that makes it right, if you know what I mean. It's an animalistic thing at the end of the day, and I think as humans we should strive to become better than the other animals, you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I disagree, just because I think that actually this kind of competitive edge that we have, this like burning desire, like this like, that we have, probably
it pushes
us to advance as a race. It pushes us to advance in medicine and technology. Guys like I think guys like Mark Zuckerberg making Facebook, they didn't really think, I want to make this so I can connect the whole world together. I think they probably thought, I want to make this because I think this is going to make me a huge amount of money.
I don't think it's just that. I think money, they probably did have some sort of passion for it. I think it was money was the driver to make them put in those hours, to make them, do these things.
20 hours in, you're working, you're thinking about how much money this is going to make.
Yeah.
So I think actually it can be used for a good thing. Like a lot of the innate parts of like humanity.
Yeah, I think that's the main downfall of communism. Personally, I think the lack of human endeavour, the lack of pushing ourselves as a race, I think under communism we stagnate as a race, especially when we're seeing communism worldwide as well, in this, as Marx says.
I mean, I think, I identified at the start, the market's a good thing, and that's why I'm not like a fully fledged communist, but I think that, you guys do, in my opinion, generally kind of underestimate the power of like human endeavor, like natural human endeavor, and like passion for things. Like I think we were speaking about like computers and that, like the person that discovered like computers wasn't like looking to like make money. He was a mathematician that like was fascinated with this stuff, and he found out about this stuff just like and like.
But there also was pressures of a world war as well, so that's like
that's not money related.
I know, but it's
and you could also argue, it's not money related.
That's still like a survival.
Yeah, and that will still exist in a.
So you're saying we need war then? Like
no, I'm not.
To have like a driver.
I'm not.
Okay. But I think there's so many other examples. Like this, Alan Turing is a great man. He had a passion for mathematics. He had a passion for this computer machine thing. But there's other, like I'd say Mark Zuckerberg. Do you agree with Mark Zuckerberg as, increase, evolve, driven us forward? Yeah, and that is. I think that would be gone, something like that. And I think there's other things like the internet, maybe, and stuff like that wouldn't be there if it wasn't for money and capitalist society.
I can agree with that is to an extent, because I think that, yeah, of course, the market drives competition, and competition breeds like advancements in technology. But you also have to look at it like, who benefits from Google, like Facebook and like Google?
Everyone benefits. Literally, even like you're going to talk about maybe kids in Africa. Like literally, everyone benefits from Facebook.
They don't.
They
How
really
do
do. Africa is one of the leaders in technological advancement. That's what people don't realize. Like African technology is miles ahead of us, and that's because of they see that as the way to escape poverty through technology.
I think also a lot of privately created technology has also been involved in sort of natural disaster prevention and management. Well, not prevention, obviously. You can't.
I mean, if you're going to talk about production, though, like climate change is a very pressing issue, and it's happening because corporations relentlessly are churning out products regardless of the effect it's having on the environment, because they're driven by profit.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a problem, but I think that there's not.
But I think
a radical change should be made. Like, everything should be, the government should control all products. I think that needs to be changed both with companies. There needs to be regulations put in companies, but there also needs to be with the demand. Like the demand, the consumer has to try and pick more eco-friendly things in order to like help the environment. There needs to be more awareness for the environment. So I think that's actually, obviously it is a problem with capitalism, but it's a solvable problem, I think. And you can still have a capitalist life.
I think that is a drawback of capitalism, but what we saw, well, like I say the Industrial Revolution and post that is the reason why we have such a climate problem right now. But I think the benefits of things like the Industrial Revolution outweighs the pressing issue of climate change.
Really?
I can accept that climate change is a huge drawback.
Not even climate change. Like you look at nuclear wars, like the development of nuclear weapons is largely imperialistic and largely down to like countries invading others for resource material and then thus having to create these monstrosities to defend themselves. And
that's wasn't developed because of money. That was developed because of politics and because of
it is developed because of money. Because half these wars start because countries invade others for resources, right? And
that was also the Soviet Union as well played a massive part in that.
I think Soviet Union pulled back on a lot of like colonialism, and like they cut down on a lot of colonies.
But when they put nuclear weapons on Cuba, is that cutting down or is that trying to provoke a world war?
I mean, I'm not a defender of the Soviet Union, as I've like said before, but you can't really blame them for arming themselves with nuclear weapons when other countries with nuclear weapons are like applying extreme pressure to them. Surely,
I mean,
but what I'm saying is like, ultimately, capitalism, like, okay, it's been good for human like advancement, but like we do have like unbelievably powerful nuclear weapons now. We do have like a quite a pressing climate change issue, and that ultimately has been driven by like profit and money.
Mm-hmm. Well, Colin, just to ask, like, you've come onto the point of climate change, which I think is an interesting one because, me and you were talking the other day about the Green New Deal and kind of like what is the actual way forward. But then yesterday, at the time of recording yesterday, the Green New Deal got voted 57 votes to 0 in the Senate to be.
What is the Green New Deal? Sorry,
the Green New Deal is proposed by some more radical Democrats as a really radical plan to sort of completely
replace all like fossil fuels for renewable energy.
So I totally accept that it would be a huge step towards, helping with climate change. But obviously, I mean, the massive drawbacks of it would cost trillions and trillions of dollars. And I just so what do you think about this in terms of, this has been overwhelmingly rejected at this current point where supposedly climate change is so crucial, you know.
You look I like how you've taken the USA for example, because if you look at the US Senate and the US Congress, what you'll find is an overwhelming of these like elected politicians are being funded by oil companies, are being funded by these companies that produce like such like monstrous like awful like greenhouse emissions, and ultimately it can be argued that they don't serve the country's interest, they serve their own pockets, and that links back to like the drive for money. And you brought up the point like it's going to cost us trillions of dollars to do, and like although that is true, I think that if you look at the damage climate change is doing, ultimately it does outweigh the cost.
Yeah, but I'd say the main argument for communism is equality.
Yeah.
If you're we live in a capitalist society right now. If you're slashing,
I think
climate change jobs and stuff, that's putting people into poverty.
The principle of communism and socialism is that you prioritize human well-being over the need for profit for human well-being.
On the point of equality, do you think there is like complete equality under communism?
Communism, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at like Mao's China, like women got so much more rights under Mao's China than they did before. Like women started working full-time jobs before they would, and things like that. Like communism is about equality. Like that is an undeniable truth.
Well,
Yeah.
hold on. Like, you've made a good point about women there, but if we look at like current communist China and stuff, where like the Uyghurs are being shoved into correction camps in West China, and it's like, and obviously, I mean, I was reading the other day that when Bohemian Rhapsody was released in China, all the scenes featuring any sort of homosexual activity are being cut. I think you're kind of cherry picking there in terms of what freedom it provides. Massive amount of censorship in China as well, and I know China's not a perfect communist country.
Is like the homophobic views and like the censorship? Is that linked to communism?
I'd say it's more linked to control.
I think it's more linked to control and culture.
I think control comes from communism.
Yeah.
I think communism gives the government pretty much all power, and I think that's really dangerous, giving power.
It gives government power in terms of
people.
allocation of wealth.
But what power does it give people? I think it takes away all power from people.
Why?
Because
people are so free to not work. They're so free to do what they want.
In what? Sorry, could you give an
So
example?
I think people have this impression because of Stalinism that if you don't work, you get shot, you get killed. But the whole point is that you just don't get paid if you don't work. The whole point is that if you work, you get paid. If you don't, you don't get paid. So it's not. People ultimately still have civil liberties to do what they want.
But I think we see, in terms of giving the government so much power, we've seen. I know you're going to say like communist Russia, Soviet Union wasn't the perfect example and stuff. We've seen liberties being taken away from people in dictatorships because of communism normally.
Yeah, because Stalin thought...
Because you give the government that much power.
Communism would work if he was like, okay, so obviously I don't want to be here for the gradual change. I want this to happen now under me. So what I'm going to do is, no matter what, I'm going to force these people to work so I can allocate the resources. But the thing is, when you do that, like you oppress the people, right? That's why it needs to be
even things like
gradual.
freedom of the press and stuff like that. We see like there is pretty much a direct correlation between like communist states and lack of freedom of the press and lack of general democracy and things like that. So, what would you say to that?
I mean, I say like yet again like freedom of the press is ultimately like you could argue now that there's not even that much freedom of the press, considering that like journals do have like a lot of money influence in them. But I would say that ultimately, what aspect do you think of communism contradicts
Freedom of the press?
Yeah.
I think it's just when you it's a repercussion. Like Karl Marx didn't say freedom of the press will be harmed by this, but in real terms, when you implement communism, you give the government that much power. That means they probably do not want to be challenged a lot of the time because they don't want to be.
Yeah.
I think communism just gives the government a lot of power to do stuff with the money that means of production create.
Yeah, I think
in practical terms it does that.
But I think in real terms, a lot of that power that the government get, I think they actually enjoy that power a lot more. Or just, I think that might just be in human nature.
Yeah, we talked about this human greed, this human strive for greed. I think the same applies for these leaders and people like that.
If you look at these failed states, Mao, you could argue North Korea, you could argue Stalin, you could argue Cuba with like the Castros. These are all run by like single people that have a drive for like power, and they're just megalomaniacs. But if you look at what like communism is trying to establish like a state, like an elected body that reallocates your wealth, not an individual.
I think the problem though comes with a lot of people or a lot of the leaders that would try and take power and try and keep power. They might use communism as that mechanism because they believe that that's a way in which they can gain that much power and keep that power.
The people that are in charge in a communist state, it like should be democratically elected, and it shouldn't be one person. It should be a government.
But I don't think that becomes impossible because of this sort of power thing that we've been talking about, like in real terms. Do you accept that could happen, like a power?
Yeah, because it's happened before.
Yes. So I think when that happens, I think democracy can fade. and I think it makes it easier for democracy to, dissolve in a communist state than in a capitalist state.
Right, you've seen dictatorships in capitalist states, right?
Yeah.
That's happened. What is the difference between capitalism and communism that creates, because considering both should have democratically elected bodies representing them, why is communism more likely?
Colin, I think what you're saying so far is, as we've pointed out, you're saying, well, you see dictatorships coming from capitalism. I think generally the reason behind that is a single figure. I think that is whether it's from a capitalist society such as, I don't know, like Germany, post-war Germany, or Tsarist Russia. I think what's come from them has been a single figure, whilst I think what you perceive to be communism is not a single figure.
What do you mean by single figure?
Like Stalin, Hitler, people like this who have kind of galvanized a movement almost single-handedly.
Sure.
Obviously with support, but by having a massive personality cult around them. But I think
did Stalin galvanize a movement? I thought he just
Lenin, I'd say probably.
Sure.
Yeah, obviously he came along later, but so in terms of, I think what I'm trying to say is like, how could a kind of, I think the thing is, from what I believe to be communism, I think it needs a kind of a head figure almost, or what I've seen so far is that there has to be a kind of.
Well, I think there's a difference between it needs and it has had. Like it has always, I'm not sure always, but it has in the notorious cases had a head. But I think it doesn't need one. It can just have like a democratically elected body.
But surely a democratically elected body.
Oh yeah, okay. It could have a head, but what's stopping Theresa May from becoming a dictator?
So much.
Yeah, and I think that those pressures will still exist in Britain if there's a democratically elected body. It's just a more socialist system.
I disagree, because I think that under communism they have a lot more, the democratically elected body have a lot more power, and that's...
Well, ultimately, if they're democratically elected, the power still lies in the people, right?
No, but I think once they're elected, it becomes a lot more dangerous.
Yeah,
the power doesn't lie in the people either. The power, if we talk about, say, government and people, I think on the people side you've got firms and individuals, and the government side you've got governments. In communism, well, there's no firms for a start, so that means that there's that liberty gone from people in terms of being able to allocate their own resources. And it's all the government. And I think that's where the control comes from. Like, I think the lack of firms is, like, Theresa May right now has to pander not only to her own government body, but also the people. She also needs to come to firms and things like that. And I think that's really stopping her from this sort of power climb and things like that.
Yeah, I think Nellis made a really good point there in terms of like what private enterprise brings to democracy in terms of, private think tanks and lobbying groups and polling institutes, and also businesses pushing for really powerful reforms. Obviously, some of them aren't so great, like massive funding from oil companies, as you said, is not wonderful, I don't think. But do you not see a value in lobbying groups, private individuals who can make a change in our society, private campaigns, privately funded, I don't know, stuff like Comic Relief, for example, privately funded schemes and endeavours that do really bring about positive change. Would they be replaced under socialism, or are they gone under socialism?
I mean, in terms of lobbying, I think I have quite the opposite view in terms of I do not have a positive view on political lobbying, because I think although there probably is good change and it's caused by it, I think if you, I think I've mentioned this before, maybe to Finlay and Nellis, but if you look at the Saudi Arabia lobby in the United States, we are selling guns to countries that are doing awful things in their countries and abroad, and we ignore the monstrosities that they commit, because ultimately there are Saudi Arabian lobbyists putting money in the pocket of US politicians, right? And I think so when you take that into account, surely the money aspect is actually taking power away from the people as well.
I'm not sure. To clarify, that's not really what I meant. I think that's more sort of a form of bribery than lobbying. I think lobbying is more of a campaign, whilst Saudi and I think
they call themselves lobbyists though.
Well, yeah, but anyone can call themselves a lobbyist.
Yeah,
I think. And also it's
they're allowed to do that.
It's what we've seen at FIFA as well. I think a lot with kind of powerful, rich individuals who can plug money and hard cash into people's pockets, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think if you can plug money and plug funds into a campaign that brings about good social change, that's more what I'm talking about as a private individual. To clarify, I'm not endorsing like Qatari officials going around at the FIFA conference.
Something that's really important to actually recognise is Nellis asked me on a few occasions, like, okay, there is inequality in society, why does that matter? And I just think in a fair society, it's a meritocracy, right? Like, you work hard, you thrive.
Yeah.
And I don't think capitalism achieves that.
Neither does communism.
Yeah, I think
I work hard and I get the same as someone who doesn't work as hard as me.
Yeah, but you still live a good life.
But that's the same. But it's not equality, though.
Yeah, you do live a good life.
Sorry, you can't just assume that you live a good life.
I mean,
everyone lives a
I mean, if we allocate, if a country as rich as the USA were to allocate their wealth so everyone had free education all the way throughout their lives, free healthcare, things like that.
But you could argue equality between countries as well is less too. So like not just within countries. I'm quite to be honest, I'm just quite confused as to what in communism would look like. So obviously countries right now are defined by sort of economic borders. So does every country have a different government? Is that correct?
Yeah.
And do they allocate the resources from country to country differently?
I think so. I'm not I'm not here to argue the.
I'm just asking.
I'm not really here to argue the logistics of communism. I'm here to argue the principles of it. And I think when you get onto I'm not here to argue how it's going to be implemented, because as I've said, I'm not.
I'm literally just asking you. I'm not trying to attack you or anything. I just want to know what that's like.
Yeah, but I don't have the answer to this.
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
What would you like it to be?
What do you mean?
Ideally.
Ideally, I think people should just have access to all the basic human rights. I think healthcare is a human right. There's in the USA, 40,000 people a year die because they don't have access to healthcare. I think that's gross. I think that people should be entitled to free education, so anyone, not just the people who can afford it, can have good careers. I just believe in those stuff. You're asking me how I would implement communism and how I would convince every country to do it. And I've said from the start that
that is not what I asked you at all.
I've said from the start that I'm not a communist.
Okay,
My question as well, though, with the idea of giving people basic rights, I don't think any of us here would disagree with that. But I think where the difference in opinion comes is I think some of us, or I would definitely believe that could be achieved via capitalism. I think it's just the way that we're allocating.
I don't think we've not seen a capitalist society succeed without the failure of others. And I know Nell's probably about to say, well, you've not seen that from a communist state either, but fair enough, right? But you've not seen that from a capitalist state. You have not seen a successful capitalist state that's built off of that's not been built off slavery, that's not been built off imperialism.
But I think what we could do is just allocation of wealth.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because I'm not a communist.
Colin, just to come back to your point, you say we're not seeing a successful capitalist state that's not been built off imperialism or gross
human rights abuse.
But I think the problem is you're looking at it. If you look at the Vikings or something, and what they did, it was over 1,000 years ago. Views just are different now,
If you look at the transatlantic slave trade, it happened a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah, I know,
That's
and
not that long.
And it's disgusting.
Yeah,
and it's disgusting.
And it's what's founded our country, the Americans, the United States of America, and it's destroyed Africa. It's put them years and years behind everyone else. That's what it's caused.
But I'm not defending it in any way, but I'm just saying it wasn't radical at the time to be for the slave trade, and this is the thing, because racism was entrenched in British and American society,
but the fact is they capitalised on the racism for profit and because of capitalism, right?
I think we should. I don't think we should bridge into attacking capitalism. I think it's.
I was going to say. I was going to say we spent a lot of time talking about communism, but why don't we go into the strengths and weaknesses of capitalism?
I mean, we could.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was going to start that off with.
Okay, can we define capitalism? Is that? Are we going to go pure free market here, or
no, just capitalism? No,
but what do you mean by capitalism?
Let's just the Western model that we.
So say British and the US, so what we got right now. Okay.
Yeah.
British and US, fair. Okay. I think that you've got people in the US that I think I've said this before. Literally going to the toilet in like 24 karat gold like toilets. Like obviously not every rich person is doing this. You've got people, a family who owns more wealth than the bottom 50% of America. Like, I think when you've got that happening, and there's also people that work like 3 jobs and can like barely keep food on the table for their family, I think there's an issue.
I mean, yes, there is an issue. There's obviously not an issue.
Sure.
And I'm not just going to sit here and deny that. But I think the thing is, you know, I just don't see that we're ever going to achieve equality. I think we should take steps to try and, you know, provide everyone with basic means and stuff. But I just don't think. I think as long as people have freedom of will and freedom of choice, they are going to go to the toilet in 24 karat gold because they can. And that's, you know, I wouldn't spend my money on that, but people do. And I think it's the point where I think freedom to do as you wish engenders, yes, sometimes bad decision making, but also such positives in terms of, you know, massive charitable donations and other things.
Yeah.
And
I think we have to note here that no system is perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is drawbacks to every system, including communism, including socialism, including capitalism. So I think when we're looking at this, we shouldn't try and find some perfect system that's going to work. I think we should look at it with a cool head and try and look at the disadvantages and advantages of both, weigh them up, and see which one do you think we think is the most successful.
Yeah, my opinion for one of the biggest positives for me of capitalism is the idea of like productivity. I think one of the main reasons, like under a communist society, I think if we all get paid the same, I don't really see the point of working hard during school, going to university, getting a good degree, and then going into work. And well, under capitalism, there is this competition that you have to go to school if you want to be successful. It's important.
All right. So if we were in a communist society, what would you do?
Well, would you
just not work and become a bin man?
I just don't see the point in working hard. Like I.
So is that what you do?
Maybe, yeah. Like,
Because I just don't think that's a common belief. If I think I've said this to Pete and Alice before, but at this moment in time I want to be a politician because I'm really into politics, and like I don't like, although money is a part of it now, I genuinely think that if I had to go to uni for 5 years and then I could become a politician in a communist society, I'd still do that over not working hard and becoming a bin man.
Yeah, I think that's great. That some people obviously have a passion, a burning desire that they want to become certain things. But I just think a lot of people just do not have that direction. They do not have that drive for certain things.
I think
and for me, like if there's no money and the things that money bring is a huge incentive, even for people like some of the most successful people have this incentive like of getting out or of making money. And I think that it would be wrong to say that passion isn't a drive for people, but I think it's also wrong to say that money isn't a big incentive. And that's why I think capitalism is like one of the big positives. Is
as I've said from the start, I do support like a market.
Yeah.
I'm not a full-fledged communism. I think that like say the model like Scandinavia have right now, where like by poll like you can take it for what it is, but they have like the happiest people on earth. Like I think that's a pretty good place to aim for now.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think the main issue at the moment is like the amount of spending that we have on like the military. And schemes like Trident, like we spend, I think it was 100 billion renewing Trident, and like the amount of money that's a huge amount of wealth that could be gone to they could be spent in the public sector. So I think that's my main issue at the moment, is like just the allocation of the wealth, like where a lot of the money is going. I just like, obviously I think it's important that we have a military, and a lot of people in Britain, we live in democracy, and they support having Trident, but I just do not see the point in having like such an extensive like weapon like nuclear armory when we have enough weapons. 10 years ago we probably had enough weapons to blow the world up 3 times over. So what's the point in spending hundreds of billions to make that 5 times over? That's
yeah. I think Colin, I think you raised an interesting point about the Nordic and Scandinavian model, and I would totally agree with you in that. I think there are some massive benefits to sort of the way countries like Sweden are being run at the moment in terms of the welfare state and providing massive maternity leave. Obviously this does come with higher taxes, but there are problems in these countries as well. But I think also if we look at sort of Scandinavia as a model, ultimately it's low population, low industry, you know, how do you expect to convert this to a country like America, where it's like lots and lots of people, lots and lots of industry, a sort of a workforce kind of ingrained in this idea, you know? I just don't think it's like...
Oh, okay.
For countries like that, I think it's really good, but for bigger countries, certainly mainland
Europe. If we take America, I think just by their increase in their military spending they made in 2018, they could have paid for like free college education. That's a massive change. I don't think that affects like industry or anything like that. That just takes a cut of the military budget. I think in terms of free healthcare, I think it's going to cost $32 trillion to implement it over the next 10 years if they went for Bernie Sanders' plan. But if they kept going with the current plan, that's still going to cost them like $39 trillion. Yeah. So you actually save money in the long run. So I think in terms of like, I'll just latch on to Medicare for all and like upper school education for free. And I think that could be implemented without really affecting the groundworks of America. And I think those are the kind of changes I'm advocating for. Because at the end of the day, I do think a market is good because I do think it's brought about really, really good stuff for us. But I think that it is hindering us in the sense that our societies are refusing to compromise profit for these basic human necessities.
I think like healthcare for all is a wonderful thing. I think the fact we have it in the UK is great, but
yeah.
And obviously in America it's not a thing. And you say, you know, that this is what I advocate. I think that's good, but I think the problem is more with just the ingrained American ideal. And also you said I don't think this is too hard. Like I don't think that's a massive societal change, but I think it is. You know,
culturally, yeah.
Culturally, yes, and also politically, yes. You know, there is for some.
I think 60% of people in America actually want Medicare for all now. I think it is the will of people to want it.
But I think it's still sort of corralling the people in power behind that is a massive.
Sure.
I think in sort of Washington, there's a massive will against it.
Because what though?
Well,
you see a lot of these people are being funded by big pharma. They're being funded by private.
Exactly, and that's a problem. But I think that's a thing that.
I mean,
has it got to the point where the US is almost too far gone in that sense, with big pharma controlling a huge amount of wealth and ultimately controlling a huge amount of people in the US? You know?
When I kind of touched on this earlier, but if you take Britain for example, which was essentially like a laissez-faire capitalist economy before like around the Boer War time, like before the NHS was implemented in the UK, there was like commotion about it because that is a massive thing to have free healthcare for all. It sounds too good to be true, and that's why people don't believe in it in America, because they think like no way that's going to happen without us losing like trillions and trillions of dollars. Mm-hmm. But I think after it's happened, even though it costs the taxpayer like a lot, in terms of how much is going to the NHS, when you look at like the NHS, you could argue it's the crowning glory of Britain. Like it's amazing. Like even though it has its flaws, it's very good. So
I was just my last point would be, does that not undermine democracy a little bit?
Yeah.
Like if you kind of believe that, although the people don't believe in this at the moment, I think that in a few years,
this is best for the long run.
This is the best long run.
Should not let the people make that the decision themselves.
I think that's not democratic, and I think. No, although you may be right.
Well, because if you look at America, 60% of people do support it, so it's like.
Yeah.
Well,
the people I'm telling you that will be convinced over time is that 40% that don't.
Right. Okay, that's fine.
I think that was very interesting. We'll probably talk about universal healthcare in another episode, a few episodes to come. Cool. Like that's also extremely interesting. We had a real long conversation. Hope you guys enjoyed.
Thanks
Subscribe and review Peter. On iTunes.
Thanks,
Peter,
it was a pleasure.
You're welcome anytime.
Oh my god!
Have a big meal after this, but thank you very much. Subscribe and review on iTunes. And I'll see you later.
Bye.